Oh, Captain, my Captain. Not in Boston this year. For the first time in 2 decades, the Bruins skate without a captain, and it's up to David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, and rookie head coach Marco Sturm to write a whole new script.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Thursday, September 4th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and a special shout out to you everydayers for never missing a thing because you subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, where each new episode is automatically added to your feeds. If you haven't done so already, please do that today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, today on the podcast, we are discussing the captain's practice from a couple days ago and the decision by the Boston Bruins to break from tradition and enter the season without a captain. To me, though, David Pastrnak is the de facto leader, even without the C stitched on his jersey. I'll make a case for that coming up. And then lastly, our Bruin of the day is going to be, well, we'll get to that later. A quick reminder off the top, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. You can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren, lifelong Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for 20 years. In fact, my first foray into Bruins blogging was the Joe Thornton trade, which we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of that terrible trade. Just absolutely awful trade. It was so bad that I just had to log on at like midnight and type out, "Say it ain't Joe," some brief thoughts lamenting Joe Thornton going off to San Jose. And that was the last time the Bruins skated in the regular season without a captain. Thornton, of course, was the captain at that point. In 2006, the following summer, they went out and signed Zdeno Chara, who, of course, served as captain for a very long tenure, and those ripples from Chara's leadership still extending to today's group. You also had the Jason Allison season. He had one season as captain, then was traded in October. The Bruins did not have a captain that season as well, like 2001-02, before Joe Thornton was given that mantle of leadership. Now, I don't believe that going captainless is necessarily a weakness for the Bruins. It's a deliberate reset that puts the spotlight squarely on David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy to lead together, for the time being at least. We'll get into who decides who becomes captain and how that could play out in training camp in a little bit. But look, the Bruins have generally always had a captain. You had Joe Thornton, who was traded, then Zdeno Chara, who handed it off to Patrice Bergeron, who handed it off to Brad Marchand, all leaders, all fixtures, all of whom are going to be in the Hall of Fame. But this year, that continuity is broken a little bit. And again, don't forget, it wasn't too long before Thornton that we had some more in continuity when Jason Allison, who was the captain for only 1 year, was traded prior to the 2001-2002 season. That season, they went captainless. But before that, from 86 to 2000, it was Ray Bourque. Joe Thornton for parts of 3 seasons, Zdeno Chara from 2006 to 2020, Bergeron for 3 seasons, Marchand for 1 2/3. Now, it's up to this new core of leadership to take over. And the Bruins typically start the year with a captain's practice. This year, no captain in sight. There's no C's in sight. We saw a tease of that when the Bruins revealed their new old look jerseys, with both Pastrnak and McAvoy having A's. It's going to be a shared leadership situation at first, anyways. Pastrnak said it's always been a group of leaders. It's not just one guy. McAvoy added, it's a completely different group than in the past. A great opportunity, really, more than anything, to have that thrust on us. That being McAvoy and Pastrnak, 2 of the longest tenured Bruins currently on the roster. Not 2 of, in fact, they are the longest tenured Bruins. Pastrnak being around since November of 2014, so 11 years. And again, spoiler alert, I've said this a few times over the summer. He's my pick for who should wear the seat. But this isn't a result of indecision. It's intentional. It's a committee approach that leans on David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, even veterans like Nikita Zadorov, who after practice the other day was quite open about being vocal and about how last year was pretty unacceptable. More than the other 2, perhaps, he's the most outspoken. Now, there's a bit of a risk without having a single rallying voice. Things could spiral. You could have guys, vying for like a conclave, right? Everybody's vying, making their case. Until that smoke goes up and there's an actual C, there could be a lot of guys vying for that role, making their case internally, externally. The opportunity, though, is inclusivity and shared accountability. And while the Bruins are framing this as leadership by committee, I think one player is already setting the tone with his production, his presence, and his commitment. And that, to me, is David Pastrnak. At the end of the day, though, the decision as to who chooses NHL captains, it's an internal decision, obviously. Generally includes the head coach, general manager, sometimes ownership, sometimes even the players themselves through an internal vote. It's no single universal process. Each team decides its own method, with the captain serving as the team's primary leader and public representative. The head coach, though, plays a significant role since he's the one most closely involved with the players on a day-to-day basis, but general manager, often a key figure in the decisions. We know that the team president and the general manager quite close, so higher levels of management may also have a say. It's kind of a business decision too, because you're looking to sell perhaps extra jerseys with the C on them, etc. But for me right now, the choice is pretty clear, and I think David Pastrnak has emerged as the Bruins' true leader, and we'll discuss why I believe that here as the podcast continues. The NFL season has arrived. Tonight, kickoff, and you can get in on the action with FanDuel's can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, jumping in on live action, whatever I'm feeling on any given Sunday. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on fantasy lineups. It's quick, easy, the best way to add a little more energy to those lazy Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com. Get started with FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's available on your favorite podcast app, whether it be Apple, Spotify, or elsewhere, as well as on YouTube. So please do hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button on YouTube as well, because when I drop a short, that usually means something big is happening or there's a key piece of information or a key take that you need to know. And a special shout out again to those everydayers out there who make this your daily listen. Very much appreciate you. No better time to become an everydayer than right now as we begin a new season. Now, for me, David Pastrnak has emerged as the Bruins' true leader. And I mean, no disrespect to Charlie McAvoy, who, again, should be very much in consideration for the captain's role. He's a bit younger. He's, I don't know, American, if that matters to the Bruins and their fans. He is, a leader. You saw him step up huge in the Four Nations face-off in that big win over Canada, although he was injured. And you saw how pained he was to miss the balance of the regular season and to see all these guys being shipped out. It's Pastrnak and McAvoy's team. You can make an argument for Jeremy Swayman as well, but obviously the captaincy rarely falls on a goaltender. Roberto Luongo, I think, had it in Vancouver. Didn't really work out that well. Now, Pastrnak, of course, elite production. He does a lot of leading on the ice. 106 points last season, 43 goals, 63 assists. From January 1 onward, he led the NHL in scoring with 69 points in 43 games. The next closest Bruin was Morgan Geekie with 57 points, 12 fewer than Pastrnak achieved just in the 2025 portion of the regular season, which is insane. Pasta was dragging the team night after night, and it was in that time, as Amelie Benjamin of NHL.com noted the other day, Pastrnak perhaps most proved himself. He didn't mail it in. He didn't, raise his hands or wave a white towel when longtime teammates were moved out. He kept grinding. He kept going out there night in, night out, putting his best foot forward and absolutely dominating with a very scant supporting cast. In fact, he elevated Morgan Geekie's game to the point where he earned himself a very nice contract extension. And hopefully that chemistry continues. Filippo Shinzawa of The Athletic mentioned that Pastrnak arrived in Boston early for the captain's skate, something he has never done before. He even admitted, I never used to be here this early, something new for me as well. And why? Because if you're in the running to be captain, you can't skip those sessions. And he knew it. You can't arrive in Boston later than everybody else. You can't be on the ice, or you can't miss on ice opportunities as soon as they pop up. You have to be out there setting the example and putting in the work. And that was one of the hallmarks of Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, working harder than anybody else. And you saw that in Chara's longevity. Marchand, same thing, earning himself a 6-year contract. Patrice Bergeron grinding to the end, winning the Selke Trophy before hanging up his skates. This time, like 6 months ago, after the Marchand trade, in light of McAvoy's injury, Pastrnak admitted it was the hardest thing he's ever endured in the NHL. They had a streak of 10 straight losses, a stripped-down roster, and he still produced at an elite level. And that's the kind of thing you want to see from a captain. Now, it's just not always the case that you give your highest paid player or your most productive player the captaincy. There are other factors at play. It's not just you look at your resume and you see, all right, he excelled here, but there's also those special skills. There's also those extracurriculars that set you apart. And Pastrnak grinding it out till the very end, producing at an elite level, facing the media, arriving early for captain's practice where he's never done that before. Those kind of things speak volumes. And he underwent summer training back in Czechia, over in Sweden, skating with William Nylander. He was reminded that hockey can still be fun. And he said the expectations are always the same in Boston. You play for an original six squad. Expectations are very high. Whoever is going to dress up in October, it's going to be a competitive team. And look, whether he wears the C or not, whether he has an A on his jersey alongside Charlie McAvoy, Pastrnak is the leader of this team. He's been around through ups and downs. He suffered the heartbreak of 2019, the disappointment of 2023. He has developed from high levels, skilled goal scorer to both a tremendous playmaker and a defensively responsible player. Yes, you can say, oh, he has so many turnovers, yada, yada. But the fact is, the players with the puck on their stick most are the ones who are going to lead the league in turnovers. Usually some of the most skilled players in the NHL lead the league in turnovers just by virtue of them having the puck on their stick more than others. You're not going to have a fourth liner leading the league in turnovers, even though they're much less skilled than David Pastrnak with the puck, because they're just simply not on the ice that much. So it makes sense. I'm so sick of that turnovers argument. His production, his long-term commitment to the team, when he signed his big deal, he had to know that there was going to be some turnover along the way. He remains committed to the Bruins, and his mindset is redemption, setting the tone, looking to get back to restore the Bruins to what they should be. And that's a huge thing for me in terms of why he should be the guy. He's coming off one of the best seasons of his career, despite the chaos around him, finishing tied for third in NHL scoring. Not a career high for him, but again, a very reduced supporting cast. Didn't even have a locked in center. He was excelling and lifting up Morgan Geekie at the same time. And once, around the turn of the calendar, the Bruins weren't really looking to be setting the world on fire. And as they fell steadily in the standings, he continued to rack up 69 points in his final 43 games, outpacing everyone in the NHL. He was single-handedly dragging the Bruins into not relevance or playoff contention, but at least watchability. And changing his personal routine. He doesn't usually arrive in Boston until right before training camp, but this year he came early to take part in the captain, no captain skate, something Bergeron, Marchand, Chara had always done. Charlie McAvoy was there as well, as was Nikita Zadorov, Jeremy Swayman. But as a top candidate to wear the C or as a leader on this team, he knew it wouldn't look good to skip those informal sessions. So he's consciously stepping into that leadership lane at the very least. He's coming off some of the hardest things he's endured in the NHL, but he's refreshed. And the one message he wants to ram home is that they're going to be a competitive team. And that's starts with him. If David Pastrnak isn't firing on all cylinders, the Bruins won't have that much of a chance. But whether the Bruins give Pastrnak the C or not, he's already captain material in everything but name. His stats, commitment, perspective prove it. No leadership conversation is complete without mentioning Charlie McAvoy. He, too, very good case for captaincy. But I think just because Pasternak's been here longer, he's the elder statesman, it's such a natural transition to go from Chara to Bergeron to Marchand to Pastrnak with McAvoy as the next guy up. It's just kind of that clear hierarchy. If you're thinking of succession, maybe you go off the board and Nikita Zadorov is your Tom Wamsgams. But for me, David Pastrnak is the choice if they're going to actually decide to name a captain. And that could be up to Marco Sturm. Look, you're not going to have a captain named without the coach even having run a single practice. So we have to at least get through training camp. Maybe they do name a captain heading into the regular season. And Marco Sturm is going to have a huge say in that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm naming him today's Bruin of the Day. And we'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. All right, Marco Sturm is the first, both former and present Bruin to be named the Locked On Bruin of the Day. This is something that we're starting here this season on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. We've already touched on Bobby Orr, Marat Husnudinov, and today we're looking at Marco Sturm, who is not just a Bruins retread. He's a first-time NHL head coach tasked with rebuilding structure and squeezing every ounce of buy-in from this roster. Now look, yes, Marco Sturm has a past in Boston. He was best remembered for, and the Bruins played this up after his announcement, the fight and the goal at the Winter Classic in 2010. He had multiple 20-goal seasons with the Bruins, and he had a style of play that's very reminiscent of the way the Bruins want to play. Offensively capable, aggressive on the forecheck, defensively responsible, and physical at times as well when needed. Not afraid to play the body, no matter where you're deployed on the ice. Those are kind of the hallmarks that the Bruins are looking to be built around, not necessarily in that order. You might go 200-foot game, aggressive forecheck, physical, and then chip in the scoring based on how the roster is built at the moment. But it's not just okay, we're bringing Marco Sturm back because of all these great memories and positive vibes. Don't forget, he's remembered in Boston as well for being the key piece in the Joe Thornton trade, which is still considered the worst in team history. Joe Thornton went off and had a Hall of Fame career. He won the Hart Trophy that very season with the San Jose Sharks after being traded. And Marco Sturm, Wayne Primo, Brad Stewart, still just a baffling and infuriating return for Joe Thornton. And Sturm even acknowledged that in his opening press conference. Like, that wasn't his fault. Don't blame him. Don't hold that against him. He does bring 4 years as an assistant with the LA Kings to the table, 3 years as AHL Ontario Reign head coach. Didn't have like a ton of team success, but reached the second round once. Helped develop guys like Quentin Byfield, Brant Clark. Solid experience, but no NHL coaching history until now. Although I think he did step in once or twice for Todd McLellan during those COVID years. Look, the Bruins collapsed hard last season, finishing last in the Atlantic. Jim Montgomery was fired. The roster was, I don't want to say stripped bare, but drastically changed. Brad Marchand's gone, won a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. Sturm inherits a team trying to climb back. And Sportsnet the other day, one of their big questions about the Bruins was the Marco Sturm effect. And even Sturm admitted the Bruins won't be able necessarily to hang with the top teams in the Atlantic on skill alone. They have to find a way to will wins through grit, defense, and determination. So the task is to rebuild some structure, demand buy-in from every player, and win ugly when needed. There's going to be a lot of 2-1, 3-2 games, and that's where it's incumbent on Jeremy Swayman to get back to form. Sturm knows this roster is not flashy outside of David Pastrnak. It's about grinding out results. He's tactical, pragmatic, and leaning into that underdog role. And Nikita Zadorov echoed that the other day. Being underdogs, it's putting an extra chip on their shoulders. Marco Sturm is one of the most important Bruins this season. If he gets buy-in, the Bruins could punch above their weight. And if he can't, it could be a repeat instead of redemption. We could get another 2024-2025 instead of what we saw in 2024 when the Bruins somehow were able to advance to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs in their first season without Patrice Bergeron. So all that to say, the Bruins are starting fresh. For the first time in 20 years, no captain to begin the season at least, or to begin training camp. David Pastrnak, though, stepping up as the true leader with great support from Charlie McAvoy, Nikita Zadorov. I believe Elias Lindholm will step up as well. Jeremy Swayman in his own way. And Marco Sturm behind the bench, bringing structure and grit. And he's going to have a big say in who the next captain will be. Is he going to embrace that kind of, I don't think he'll be adverse to naming a European captain for the Boston Bruins. How the Bruins handle this new leadership model will decide if 2025-26 is redemption or another repeat of last year's collapse. So many times the Bruins have had this next man up mentality, and players have risen to kind of the work ethic that was displayed by Chara, Bergeron, Marchand. Now you have some young guys who are looking to crack the full-time roster. You have some new faces who may or may not be well-versed in Bruins culture. So it's going to be up to these core guys of McAvoy, Pastrnak, yes, Zadorov, Lindholm, to set that example. And again, new leadership model. If you look at the hierarchy, it's kind of 2 down. You could have a guy, hopefully Pastrnak, wearing the C, and I think he is well suited, well prepared, and well molded to take on that role. All right, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Check out the Locked On NHL podcast as your second listen, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. You can find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Beginning Monday, we are going back to 5 days a week. So again, no better time to subscribe, to catch up on some other summer episodes. And I'm really looking forward to jumping in full gear on Monday and talking about the Boston Bruins, who are underdogs this season, very underrated or not much expected. And that's seen in the 76.5 over-under, which I discussed on Monday, which I believe they will hit the over very easily on that. Anyways, please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.